For years, I kept falling into the same trap that catches nearly every gardener in America. I believed August was the month when you began saying goodbye to the soil. I can still remember standing in the heavy, humid stillness of a late summer afternoon, the air thick with heat while cicadas screamed their sharp, desperate song through the fading season. I would look across my garden beds and feel a deep, quiet sadness settle over me. The energy of spring was gone. Bean pods had dried into brown skeletons on the vines. Spring lettuce had become nothing more than a bitter, bolted memory. The cucumber plants were slowly giving up. It seemed as though the grand performance was almost finished, and all that remained was to collect the last scattered tomatoes, clear away the debris, and put the garden beds to sleep. So I stopped sowing. I simply drifted through September, and by the time October arrived with its crisp golden light, my garden had become a graveyard of frostbitten stems and bare, brown, wasted soil. All through autumn and winter, I drove to the grocery store to buy plastic-wrapped spinach with no flavor and carrots that were hard and woody. Meanwhile, just outside my window, my empty beds sat beneath the gentle, beautiful autumn sun of October and November, producing absolutely nothing. Does any of that sound familiar? Have you ever reached August and felt completely worn down, carrying that shared exhaustion of summer until you were ready to stand back and let the weeds take over? It was an older gardener at the community plots who finally shattered that belief for me. I remember the moment clearly. It was the sweltering middle of August, one of those days when the air feels like a warm, wet blanket pressed against your skin. He was working with a simple hand hoe and a packet of spinach seeds, carefully drawing a shallow furrow through a patch of soil he had just cleared after pulling out his exhausted bush beans. I walked over, wiped the sweat from my eyes, and asked what on earth he could possibly be planting so late in the year. He stopped, straightened his back, wiped his forehead with a dirty sleeve, looked at me, and smiled. "Late, son?" he said. "This is the most important sowing of my entire year. Everything I'll eat from October through Christmas, I'm putting into the ground right now." That conversation cost me nothing, yet it changed my relationship with the earth forever. It doubled the length of my growing season, but even more importantly, it taught me a quiet and beautiful truth about life. By turning away from the garden in August, I had been quitting at halftime. I was abandoning what is often the finest growing season of the entire year. And that is what I want to share with you today. If you are ready to stop buying tired greens from the grocery store, and if you want to experience the deep, sweet magic of an autumn harvest, then let's talk about the 12 vegetables you need to plant this month. The ground is not finished with us yet. In fact, the best part may still be ahead, the blueprint, the sacred geometry of sun and soil. Before opening a single packet of seeds, we first need to understand the logic behind the August garden. Why does this method work? How can planting during the blazing heat of late summer produce some of the sweetest and most tender vegetables of the entire year? The first secret is hidden inside a remarkable physiological defense mechanism. The vegetables we are planting now are cool season crops. Unlike summer tomatoes and peppers, they are not racing away from frost. They are growing directly toward it. Nearly every vegetable we will discuss is not only capable of surviving frost, but actually becomes better because of it. When the cold nights of autumn arrive, these plants undergo an extraordinary botanical transformation. They begin filling their tissues with sugar, using it as a natural, non-toxic antifreeze that helps protect their cell walls from freezing. This surge of sugar transforms autumn spinach, carrots, and kale into culinary treasures, making them far sweeter and more tender than the same crops grown during spring. The second secret is the gradual shortening of daylight, a seasonal phenomenon gardeners know as the Persephone period. The name comes from the Greek goddess of spring, who was destined to spend part of each year in the darkness of the underworld. In gardening, the Persephone period refers to the time when daylight falls below 10 hours per day. Once this period begins, plant growth slows almost to a standstill. The key to creating a productive autumn and winter garden is to calculate backward from that point. Ideally, our vegetables should reach between 75 and 100% maturity before the sunlight retreats and the Persephone period begins. The calculation itself is simple. Start by finding the average date of your first frost. Across much of the United States, from the colder soils of New England to the gentler valleys of zones 7 and 8, that date usually falls somewhere between late September and early November. Next, Use the days to maturity printed on the seed packet and count backward from your expected frost date. But there is one essential adjustment for autumn planting. Add a buffer of approximately 2 weeks, sometimes called the fall factor. This extra time is necessary because plant growth gradually slows as September and October bring shorter days and colder nights. However, August presents one major obstacle that we must overcome: heat. During this month, the soil is often warmer than at any other point in the year. That warmth can make seeds germinate with incredible speed, sometimes in half the time required during spring. But it can also become a serious threat. When soil temperatures rise above approximately 80 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, crops such as lettuce and spinach may enter thermodormancy, a condition that can stop germination completely. So how do we defeat the heat? Let me share one of my favorite inexpensive garden tricks. You do not need an elaborate or costly shade system. I use a very simple method. Place cardboard boxes, flat sheets of cardboard, or lightweight metal baking pans over sticks pushed into the garden bed. Then secure them with paper clips. This creates small, ventilated shade tunnels directly over the planted area. The barrier blocks the fierce August sunlight from striking the soil, while still allowing cooler air to circulate underneath. This simple method can lower the soil temperature by an astonishing 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the cool microclimate that cool season seeds need to germinate successfully instead of dying in the heat. Now that the plant is clear, and the soil has been refreshed with a nourishing layer of organic compost to replace what the summer crops removed, let us meet our 12 cold-hardy champions. The 12 cold-hardy champions: spinach, Spinacia oleracea, the sugar-rich queen of winter. There may be no better vegetable for the autumn garden than spinach. Spinach is completely devoted to cool weather. It despises heat, which is why growing it in spring can become a frustrating race against bolting. But when spinach is planted in August, it matures as the days become shorter and cooler, producing thick, dark, succulent leaves filled with remarkable sweetness. Spinach generally reaches maturity in about 40 to 45 days. This means seeds planted during August can begin feeding you generously by late September and continue producing through the heavy frosts of November and December. In milder growing zones or beneath a simple low tunnel, spinach planted now can survive the winter under a light layer of straw mulch. It will rest quietly through the coldest months, then burst back into growth during early spring, providing an abundant harvest before most other vegetables have even been planted. The greatest challenge is convincing spinach seeds to germinate in the warm soil of August, because they often become dormant when temperatures rise above 75 degrees Fahrenheit. My favorite trick is to spread the seeds over a damp paper towel, roll it up, seal it inside a plastic bag, and place it in the refrigerator for 1 week before planting. This period of chilling helps break their heat dormancy. Afterward, plant the seeds about half an inch deep, water them with cool water during the evening, and keep the soil consistently moist. Harvest the outer leaves one at a time so the center of the plant remains intact and continues producing for many weeks. 2. Lettuce, Lactuca sativa, savoring the sweet shoulder season. By the end of August, the bitter struggle of growing lettuce through summer heat is finally coming to an end. Planting lettuce now allows it to develop in the gentle, cooling conditions it naturally prefers. I enjoy sowing loose-leaf, butterhead, and romaine varieties together. Combining these different types creates a wonderful range of colors, shapes, and textures for the table. Loose-leaf varieties can provide tender baby greens in as little as 30 days. They are perfect for harvesting as a cut-and-come-again crop, allowing you to trim the leaves and return later for more. Meanwhile, romaine and heading varieties continue growing steadily, usually reaching full size in about 50 to 60 days. Like spinach, lettuce seeds may struggle to germinate when the soil is too hot. One simple way to avoid this problem is to sow them during the cool hours of the evening. Keep the surface of the soil evenly moist, especially while the seeds are beginning to sprout. As the autumn nights become colder, place a lightweight floating row cover or a simple cold frame over the plants. This small layer of protection traps just enough warmth from the soil to keep the delicate leaves growing beautifully into December, even after the surrounding gardens have turned brown and empty. 3. Radishes, Raphanus sativus, the sprinters of the soil. For gardeners who want fast results, radishes are the true sprinters of the autumn garden. Some varieties can move from seed to plate in as little as 25 days, making them one of the easiest, most forgiving, and most rewarding vegetables to plant in August. Cool autumn weather transforms radishes. It makes their roots crisper and milder while taming the woody texture, hollow centers, and harsh spiciness that summer heat can create. Radishes are also perfect for filling empty spaces. Whenever you remove a tired summer squash or a fading cucumber vine, lightly loosen the exposed soil and immediately sow a row of radishes. Plant the seeds about half an inch deep, space them roughly 1 inch apart, and keep the area moist. But do not limit yourself to the familiar small red spring varieties. August is also an excellent time to plant large winter radishes such as Japanese daikon, which usually require around 60 days to mature. These winter radishes develop into substantial roots with a mild, sweet flavor. They can remain safely stored in the cold ground through hard frosts. When you need one, simply walk into the winter garden, brush away the snow, and pull a fresh root directly from the earth. After harvesting radishes, remember to remove their leafy tops before placing them in the refrigerator. If the greens remain attached, they continue drawing moisture from the roots, eventually leaving them shriveled and rubbery. 4. Arugula, Aruca vesicaria, the resilient, peppery bite arugula, is an exceptionally hardy, fast-growing green that flourishes in the cool and damp conditions of autumn. Cold weather softens its sharp, peppery bite, transforming it into a flavor that is milder, nuttier, and far more complex. Tender baby arugula can be ready to harvest only 3 weeks after sowing. Because it behaves as a cut-and-come-again crop, you can continue gathering fresh leaves from the same planting for several weeks. Arugula barely seems to notice a light frost. I have seen it remain upright, green, and vigorous in my garden, long after the first hard freeze had flattened nearly every tender summer green around it. There are 2 main types worth planting during August. Common salad arugula grows extremely quickly, while wild or perennial arugula develops more slowly but produces deeply lobed leaves with an even stronger and more aromatic flavor. Scatter the seeds shallowly across a broad strip of soil. Once the leaves reach a few inches in height, use scissors to cut them just above the growing crown. The plants will quickly send out a fresh flush of leaves. By sowing 1 short row every 2 weeks throughout August, you can keep your winter salad bowl filled with fresh arugula for a remarkably long time. 5. Beets, Beta vulgaris. The dual harvest jewel of autumn beets are among the most generous vegetables you can plant in August, because one sowing provides 2 separate harvests: nutritious, earthy leaves above the soil, and tender, sweet roots beneath it. The greens can be harvested and cooked in as little as 30 days, while the roots generally take around 50 to 60 days to reach their full sweet size. Beets planted in August tolerate the remaining summer warmths surprisingly well, but they truly begin to shine once the autumn air becomes cold. The cooler weather encourages the plants to convert stored starches into sugar, creating a deep and rich sweetness that spring-grown beets simply cannot match. What appears to be a single beet seed is actually a small cluster containing several seeds. For this reason, when they are planted half an inch deep and approximately 1 inch apart, several seedlings often emerge together in tight clumps. Once the young plants are a few inches tall, carefully thin each cluster until only 1 strong seedling remains. Do not discard the seedlings you remove. These tender beet thinnings are delicious baby greens and make a beautiful addition to a fresh salad. With a thick protective mulch of straw, mature beets can remain in the cold soil throughout winter. Instead of harvesting them all at once, you can leave them in place and pull fresh roots whenever you need them. 6. Carrots, Daucus carota, November's underground nectar. Ask an experienced gardener to name the greatest treasure of the autumn garden, and the answer will often come immediately: a frost-touched carrot pulled from the cold soil of November. Carrots planted in spring can certainly be good, but those grown through the steadily cooling weeks of autumn undergo a remarkable transformation. Frost converts their starches into sugar, giving the roots a crisp, intense, almost candy-like sweetness that is, without exaggeration, one of the finest flavors the earth can offer. Carrots generally need about 70 to 80 days to mature, which means their seeds should be planted during the first half of August. The main challenge is keeping their tiny, delicate seeds consistently moist while they germinate. Carrot seeds are famous for sprouting slowly. If the soil surface dries out and forms a hard crust before the seedlings emerge, those fragile young plants may die beneath the ground. To prevent this, begin with a carefully prepared bed free of stones, then mix a small amount of bone meal into the upper layer of soil to provide phosphorus for strong root development. Sow the seeds shallowly and water the row thoroughly. Then use the traditional board or burlap method. Place a damp wooden board or a sheet of wet burlap directly over the planted row to hold moisture against the soil surface. Check beneath the covering every day. The moment you see the first tiny, feather-like green shoots appearing, remove it so the seedlings can receive sunlight. Once the carrots become established, thin them until each plant has approximately 3 inches of space. As the hard freezes of winter approach, cover the bed with a heavy layer of straw. Beneath that protection, the roots can remain sweet and crisp, ready to be dug fresh from the soil throughout the winter. 7. Turnips, Brassica rapa. The versatile, fast-growing staple turnips are one of the fastest, toughest, and most generous crops you can grow in the autumn garden, providing 2 separate harvests from a single planting. Their nutritious, peppery leaves can be ready for cooking in only 30 days, while the roots develop into sweet, tender bulbs in approximately 50 to 60 days. If your only experience with turnips has been the large, woody, bitter roots sold in grocery stores, autumn-grown turnips may completely surprise you. When they mature in cool fall weather, they become wonderfully crisp, mild, and pleasant to eat. For an August planting, I especially recommend small white Japanese salad turnips, such as Tokyo Cross. When harvested young, these roots are so tender and sweet that they can be eaten raw, sliced thin, with the crisp texture and sweetness of a fresh apple. Sow the seeds about ½ inch deep, then thin the young plants until they are spaced 4 inches apart. The seedlings you remove do not need to be wasted because they can be eaten as tender greens. As the nights become cooler, the remaining roots will develop into sweet, juicy treasures beneath the soil. Larger storage varieties can stay in the ground through hard freezes, offering a dependable supply of hearty, satisfying food throughout the deepest months of winter. 8. Broccoli, Brassica oleracea varietalica, tight crowns in the cooling air. Many gardeners find spring broccoli difficult to grow. They plant it with high hopes, only to watch late spring heat waves stress the plants and force them to bolt too early, producing tall, loose sprays of bitter yellow flowers. Fall broccoli tells a completely different story. Because the heads form while temperatures are falling rather than rising, the plants can produce remarkably tight, dense, sweet crowns without suffering from the same heat stress. Broccoli generally needs around 60 to 70 days to reach maturity, making August the critical planting window. In colder northern regions, healthy transplants should be placed in the garden during early August. In warmer growing zones, seeds can be sown directly during the first week of the month. Plant your broccoli in rich, firm soil, space each plant about 18 inches apart, and keep the bed consistently watered. As the air begins to cool, the plants will reward you with a magnificent central head. And here is the best part. After harvesting that main crown, do not pull the plant from the ground. Fall broccoli will continue producing a long succession of tender, sweet side shoots for many weeks, remaining strong through repeated light frosts. 9. Cabbage, Brassica oleracea var. capitata. The foundation of the winter larder cabbage is another powerful cool-season vegetable that performs exceptionally well as an autumn crop. Like broccoli, its close relative, cabbage forms dense, crisp heads beautifully as the weather cools. Frost improves it even further by drawing out the natural sugars hidden within its leaves. Most cabbage varieties require approximately 60 to 80 days to mature. For that reason, young and healthy transplants should be set out during early August. Space them at least 18 inches apart in fertile soil that drains well. Autumn cabbage is remarkably resistant to cold and can remain standing beautifully in the garden through repeated hard freezes. That strength means you do not need to rush the harvest. The heads can be left in place and cut whenever you need them throughout late fall and early winter. A successful crop of fall cabbage becomes one of the strongest foundations for winter meals. These dense, sweet heads can remain fresh for weeks when stored in a cool location. They can become the beginning of warming winter soups, crisp slaws, and generous batches of homemade probiotic-rich sauerkraut, capable of feeding your family for months. 10. Swiss chard, Beta vulgaris, Substri vulgaris. painted ribs on a cold canvas. If you are searching for a vegetable that is every bit as beautiful as it is delicious, Swiss chard may be the perfect choice. It is one of the toughest, most resilient, and longest-lasting crops you can plant during August. Swiss chard handles the lingering heat of late summer with remarkable ease, yet it also remains upright and vigorous when the sharp cold of autumn begins to arrive. Its seeds, like beet seeds, are actually small clusters containing multiple seeds. Sow them about 1 inch deep, then thin the young plants until they stand approximately 12 inches apart. This spacing allows every plant enough room to form a large and highly productive crown. Swiss chard can be harvested one leaf at a time, beginning with the outer leaves. The plant will continue replacing them, producing tender and highly nutritious growth from early autumn through the winter. In milder climates, a single August planting may continue feeding you all the way into the following spring. As the rest of the autumn garden begins to fade and lose its color, Swiss chard remains like a living work of art. Its brilliant red, golden yellow, and pink-ribbed stems illuminate the garden, creating a vivid and defiant burst of life against the approaching gray of winter. 11. Mustard greens, Brassica juntia. The smoky, spicy kick mustard greens are fast-growing, exceptionally cold-hardy leafy vegetables that bring a bold and memorable flavor to the autumn table. Because harvesting can begin in only 30 to 40 days, they fit perfectly into an August planting schedule. During the heat of summer, mustard leaves can become intensely spicy and bitter. But once the cool autumn air arrives, that sharp bite begins to soften. Frost sweetens the leaves even more, transforming their raw heat into a rich, complex, almost smoky flavor that becomes especially delicious when the greens are sautéed or slowly braised. Sow the seeds shallowly, then thin the seedlings so each plant has enough room to develop. Harvest the outer leaves whenever you need them, allowing the center of the plant to continue growing. The larger Asian mustard varieties are excellent additions to stir-fries and are also ideal for lacto-fermented dishes. They can provide a reliable supply of fresh, spicy, homegrown greens deep into the cold winter months, when garden produce becomes difficult to find and increasingly expensive. 12. Garlic, Allium sativum, planting the seeds of tomorrow's hope. Finally, we arrive at garlic, the crop that requires the longest wait but offers one of the greatest rewards. August is the month when the careful gardener begins preparing for it. Garlic is traditionally planted during autumn, several weeks before the ground freezes solid. Even so, August remains a critical month because this is when the soil should be prepared and the planting material secured. Now is the time to order high-quality, certified seed garlic from a trustworthy nursery instead of relying on grocery store bulbs, which may carry diseases into your garden soil. Use August to choose a sunny location with exceptionally good drainage. Then enrich the bed with a generous layer of compost. When planting time arrives, which may be as early as late September in cold northern regions, carefully separate each garlic bulb into individual cloves. Plant every clove with its pointed end facing upward, about 2 inches deep and 6 inches apart. Once the planting is complete, cover the entire bed with a thick, protective blanket of straw. During late autumn, the cloves will quietly send strong roots deep into the soil before the ground freezes. They will then remain dormant through the bitter winter. At the first touch of warmth in spring, they will surge back into vigorous growth and reward you the following summer with large, full heads of garlic. Few garden preparations provide such a generous return while demanding so little continuing effort. The Guard, Organic Protection. In late summer, I would be doing you a disservice if I ignored one of the most important challenges in the August garden. Although autumn crops usually face far fewer pest and disease problems than spring crops, planting during late summer still requires careful attention. The remaining warmth of summer means certain pests, especially cabbage worms, flea beetles, and root maggots, may still be at the height of their populations. But protecting our food does not require harsh or toxic chemicals. We can work with nature's own designs to create an effective and organic system of defense. The first and strongest line of protection is a physical barrier. The moment you transplant young broccoli, cabbage, or kale, cover the plants with a lightweight floating row cover supported by simple wire hoops. This thin fabric still allows sunlight, water, and fresh air to reach the vegetables, but it prevents white cabbage butterflies from landing on the leaves and laying their destructive eggs. To defend cabbage family plants against root maggots, place a simple collar made from paper or tar paper flat against the soil around the base of each stem. This barrier blocks adult flies from laying eggs along the root line. Cutworms can be stopped with an equally simple method. Place a cardboard collar or cylinder around each young seedling, pressing it approximately 1 inch into the soil. This creates a strong shield around the vulnerable stem. If caterpillars still manage to reach your cole crops, you can use a microbial solution known as Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT. BT is a naturally occurring soil bacterium that specifically attacks the digestive systems of leaf-eating caterpillars. It is completely non-toxic to people, birds, bees, and other beneficial insects, making it an exceptionally safe option for protecting food crops. Finally, remember to invite nature's helpers into the garden. Reserve a small portion of your beds for repeated plantings of small flowered herbs and flowers such as borage, yarrow, sweet alyssum, and dill. These plants provide nectar and shelter for beneficial predators, including lacewings, whose larvae consume enormous numbers of aphids, as well as parasitic wasps. Together, these helpful insects create a healthy, self-balancing ecosystem that naturally keeps pest populations under control. The sacred refusal of the empty bed. At its core, the entire practice of August sowing is built upon one simple and beautiful refusal. The refusal to allow any garden bed to remain empty, idle, and wasted during the warm and productive weeks of late summer. Every empty bed in August represents a space that could be feeding your family with sweet, nutrient-rich greens during November and December. All that possibility requires is a scoop of compost, a packet of seeds, and a small amount of thoughtful care. So, as we move through these hot final weeks of summer, do not repeat the mistake I made during my early years as a gardener. Do not stand beneath the heavy August heat. Look at your fading summer vines and decide that the growing season has ended. Instead, walk into your garden carrying a packet of spinach seeds, a packet of radishes, and a tray of healthy brassica transplants. Look at every newly cleared space not as a door that is closing, but as a fresh and exciting opportunity waiting to begin. Clear the soil, feed it, then sow it. Within only a few weeks, the autumn winds will arrive. While gardens everywhere else begin turning brown and falling asleep, yours can become greener, sweeter, and even more productive than it was throughout summer. Step outside this week while the soil is still warm and the planting window remains open. The most important sowing of your entire year may be the one you make right now. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here on Earthly Delights. If this video helped you, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me what you are planting this August, and share the video with another gardener. Until next time, happy gardening, keep your hands in the dirt, and allow the soil to teach you how to grow.